So very simple question, how you ended up creating interiors for business jets?
So I have an architecture interior design department, and we have also an event department. So when I started like working with my clients on their houses or on their events or on their yachts or anything, you know, like was more particular, then I had a client of mine that was we're actually working on their event, on their wedding, and there was a lot of private plane flying back and forth. And once I was actually I had to organize something for one of the plane, like decorating it. When I went inside, I was like, why does it look like so like, you know, like commercial? I'm like, you know, and I was like, okay, let me organize it because I knew what my client wanted. So I literally went and got some cushions and, you know, like played around with, you know, like just like, you know, I just wanted to make it a little bit more homey and more like what he likes, and especially the color palette. And then and the people, like, you know, the captain was looking at me, was like, oh my god, it's amazing, I can't even recognize the plane, you know, and like in like 20 minutes you just transform the whole entire thing, you know, like so quickly. And then when my client went actually in the flight, he called me, he was like, you know, that's amazing, you didn't even give me such a quotation, you know, like a quotation, and you transformed the whole entire plane as if, you know, like it's exactly what I really liked, with so simple things. And well, for me, it was just I didn't even think about it, you know, on a further thing. I was like, you know, like I know he's very busy, he has a long flights to catch, and so on and so forth. I was like, let me at least like do something that, you know, like smooth, you know, like the color palette and everything that he likes. So it started like that basically, and then he was like, well, why don't you do the interior of the plane? And I was like, he was like, I'm ordering a new a plane, blah blah blah. He put me in contact with some of the person in Switzerland. And then I was like, well, this is what I wanted. And they were like, no, 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 you can't do this. There were so many things that they were like, so many no's. And I'm the type of person that I always like to like understand what I'm working on and like discover. And I was like, okay, maybe technicality, I'm not, you know, like I'm not so strong in like, you know, like do's and don'ts on a flight, on a plane. And then I got a course. I got this small course about like teaching me exactly like, you know, like what are the things that can be done. And I was like, well, it's not so complicated, because then you can really create more of
Yes.
what, you know, as long as you can actually safety and security and all, you know, like once you have this guideline, then you can create whatever you want. And I was like, well, I could understand why people don't. I was like, maybe there's no demand on, you know. And so I did the first plane for this client of mine, and they were super happy. And then they were like, you know, like amazed by it, and even the captain was impressed. And then it started like that. So I'm not doing tons of them. I'm just doing like very selected few for different clients that whenever they want. And basically, this is how it opened up to work with some clients on like refurbishing their flight. Some of them, basically, what we do is like we just walk in and we just like, you know, like take what is in place, and just we change the upholstery, or like, you know, like come up with some things that are like, you know, like create some shelving, or, you know, like create some things that basically transform the flight and the mood and the colors and things like that, by not going all the way extreme on like, you know, like redoing the whole carcass. Sometimes we have like now we've got a client that wants to build wants to order one. And so basically it's more fun, because then we're from the
You start
beginning,
from
you know, like
zero.
exactly. So I can say, okay, can we do this and can we not do that? And they're like, well, yes, this can be done, but like this is you're pushing the boundary a bit too much. So so it's just like also like negotiating with, you know, like with them on like do's and don'ts and things like that. But I think there's a lot of potential, and there's like a huge market for that, because in general, I think in flights or in things have been done until till date on very basic, you know, like, and it's sort of like a very like color palette or structure, or like, you know, like even sofas and chairs and things like this that are very standard. And when you change a little bit, you know, like, because like the way that I work also with my events or the architecture project that I do, there's always a story to it. And I try to understand exactly what my clients they require and what is the requirement, and then recreate the story on that. And when I sit with my clients, even for their boats or for their planes, I'm like, tell me, how would you like to live it? You know, what do you want? What do you want to use it for? And some of them, they're like, you know what? I want to have a bed. I want to have my table. I want to have this. I want to have that. And some of, you know, like, and I'm like, well, that can be done. So we segregate it, we segment it in a way that also something that I've realized as well that is important is that things nowadays can be modular. So, for instance, like a bed can be transformed into a sofa. You know, like things like that we can work on. And it really works well because you can actually like join two chairs next to each other. You can make it into a bed, or you can open them up and, you know, like have two chairs. Instead of changing all the time, if you can have something that is basic but you can play around with it in different ways, I think this really works well. So that's what
So,
I'm
are
trying
you
to do.
ready to come up with a concept with let's say, quite similar to outdoor furniture? So we could use for private planes something similar, because as you told, a lot of private planes are used by huge operators. So basically, they are not. They don't have a possibility to make it too personal, because it's charter aircraft, so clients are changing, and you never know if the next one will like this kind of color or so they're trying to go neutral, as you say, with something what is good but not too personal, not too disturbing, not too funky or whatever. But so far I never saw a concept like that. So basically, it would be something more than interesting, because getting this charter plane, yes, you have something neutral. A lot of people would like, but still, with your concept, it would be more than interesting, because you can actually play with the plane interior in a very different way.
Exactly. So that's what actually I'm working on. Like for instance, like now we're working on a flight on a plane that belongs to this client of mine, and so the mother has a completely different color palette, and the husband and the kids, they want something completely very Armani look, you know, like very neutral. So what we're doing is that we're creating the back of the sofa, like the back of the chairs. So we've got something that is slides, like basically you slide it off, and we're working on this. So basically you can just like remove the back of the chair, remove the base of the chair, the structure stayed the same, just fit in and fit out, you know. So we're working on things like this that you can actually keep the structure as it is, and if one day they want to sell the plane and, you know, like, or charter it to somebody else, you just put back more something that is more neutral, and then basically have that one going. And also I realized that a lot of my clients are like, okay, if I want to use my plane, I don't want somebody else to have slept in my bed, even if we charter it. So give me, so what I said, okay, fine, fine. Then we have a second part that is going to be is like a second kit, you know, like basically fit in. So whenever they charter it, you know, like a standard, whenever it goes back to private, what we do is that we just fit in, fit out. So I don't need to even to be there. So we've got the specification of the sofa, of the bed, of the chairs, or whatever it is. Then we just tuck it out, put back the new things inside, and then that's it. And then there you go. You just put the cushions and the accessory, and then, you know, it's the same plane, but you just have this different color palette. And the only cost difference is basically uh, because you produce it in like 2 times or like 3 times. So basically, you just put it out, you know, like screw them back on, and then basically you've got a new entire fit out. So these are
Very
the things that
interesting.
we're working on. Um, to be able to facilitate that. And I think now more and more, because people, they don't have the same mentality on like, okay, I want a new flag, do it from A to Z. You know, like they people think wisely, and they want that. And when for instance some of the clients that I have, money is not an issue for them. But when I come up with this type of concept, they're like, oh my God, wow, I love it. Because they nobody kind of like goes to them and says, okay, you don't need to change the whole entire thing, and they're like, oh my God, that's great. So I think it's also about what you said, that was a very important thing, is knowledge and experience, and to teach them like, okay, well, this can be done as well. So you don't have to spend millions on changing the whole thing. Let us, you know, like make different kits, structure stays the same, but you can just play around with them. Even the direction of the chairs, even like for instance, now I'm working on something that basically we can change the direction of the chairs. And so instead of being like, you know, like very straightforward,
So the
just align
setup
them
will be
together.
different. Yes.
like just align them together, just change them, and then that's it. It's just a mechanism basically of being able to do that.
Trendy question. Do you use sustainable material in what you're creating?
Definitely use sustainable material for most of the stuff that we do, even interior of houses and like whatever there is. There is a lot of different companies that you can get fabrics, and we do that. They're recyclable fabric, and it's great because then you can actually redo whatever you want with them. You can actually have your pattern. You can recycle them. There's different factories that you can actually order things, and they have different divisions. Even in Italy or in any of the brands, you can say I want recyclable fabric. That depends on you. I think that depends on actually the designer or the user. Um, and even recyclable plastics, recyclable, like metal, recyclable, whatever. The clients that I work with, rarely, I never had any client that came to me and said, I want fur, like I want real fur, or I want these type of things, or animals and things like that. Um, Now, I mean, because of the products and the technology that now people were using, there's a lot of recyclable fabric that you can get, and you can even have like suede imitations, leather imitations that are really actually even more than like the actual leather or the actual suede experience, the feel. So I was working with a client of mine for a lot of things that they wanted to order, and I wanted to test them, and they're like, they think they're like, they have their doctoral and PhD in like leather. I brought them this recyclable suede material. And I was like, which one do you prefer? And they're like, oh my God, of course, this is the real one. I was like, well, no, it's not actually, like this is actually, and they were impressed. They were like, oh my God, but you've got the field, you've got the thing. I was like, yeah, well, it's not, it's recyclable, it comes from recyclable material. And they were like, okay, fantastic, let's go for it. So again, it's a part of educating. And I think it comes to where designers or architects or we have to be educated. We have to want to go to this direction and want to go, because also what I realized, like whenever you go on, I mean, whenever you're doing an architecture interior design for a house or for a project, it's more to your hand, because then you can do whatever. You don't have to answer to anybody technically wise. When you go on yachts or planes, you have to pass by a lot of approvals. And I think this is where the challenge is to actually also educate them to be like, listen, okay, well, you are using this material, but then we can also use this material that has all the components. It has a fire resistant. It has this all of this like waterproofing thing. And are you okay with it? And then, for instance, sometimes they send it for testing, and they come back. They're like, wow, like we're actually impressed that like you can use this. So yes, of course, go ahead. So I think this education thing comes in a much more broader scale, and it's important to educate a lot of people and to educate oneself. Like I learn on a day-to-day basis. Even for instance, like this morning, I wanted to use something for an event, for a wedding, and I was just like walking by this morning, and I saw this like on the beach. I saw this like algae, and I was like, wow. It actually looks pretty nice. Like if we just take them and if we just dry them or like leave them under the flowers, because they actually they maintain water for a while. So instead of actually getting moss, like getting this thingy and watering them and after throwing them, and I was like, well, let's try that. So I got my guys, they were like laughing at me. And I was like, guys, like I wanted to know if we can try to do centerpieces as a base with that. And just like because it has this harder substance to it. So they're gonna try. I'm not sure it's gonna work or not, but I think there is, like you have to always see, because nature, from what I understood in my life and also in my work, nature has everything. It's always there. And if we just, instead of like going on the fasting, if we go back to nature and try to understand what are the things that nature has and try to use them to our advantage or to use them on our thing, I think there's a lot of things that we can learn as well from it. And
There's
I think
one
that's quite an important component.
there's one sentence again we're repeating many times in aviation, that the most sustainable way of flying, we have it. Look at the birds.
Exactly. It's
This is a
true.
perfect model of aerodynamics and so on. Aviation, as you told, has a lot of safety rules and regulations regarding materials, and sometimes we are not the fastest industry to adapt rules and regulations. This is true. Are you ready to work on your future clients' eVTOLs? Because it looks like those are coming and flying cars and so on.
They are. They are. I think the future of aviation in general. I think there's a huge development that is going to happen. I think that I see like it's going to grow to another level. I think that what we have today is just like it's just like a point that suddenly is going to flip to completely a new. I think new everything. You go inside of the. It's like a taxi. It's like an air taxi. And you just sit there and you're like, okay, this address, and boom, it goes, and you don't have a passenger, you don't have a pilot, you don't have anything. And I was like, oh my God. So that's gonna definitely, like even like that technology is gonna take things to another level. And I think that even the whole aviation most probably is gonna go to another level. I think that even now I heard that they're like, like when we were a child, we were, like we saw like Star Trek, like a teleportation and like from here to there. But I think there's so many things that are actually under research. And I'm not sure if it's done purposely or not, because they, like because maybe they don't want to bring it out, like at one go. But I think places like Dubai or like other places, they're actually really opening up to really new thing. And
My last question: would you be ready to start, let's say, a series of educational? I would say, from your perspective as a designer, are you ready to explain what and how can be done different in private jets?
I think it's important, although I have not, like I've got very little knowledge because I feel that it's such a huge industry, and there's a lot of things, but I believe is like really thinking out of the box. And when for instance I was talking with this guy, I was like, why not? And I was getting frustrated. It was like, no, you cannot use this, and I was like, okay, explain to me why not? Like so that I understand. And they were like, and they were just like, well, just because. I'm like, but because of what? Like, like, so it's just like it's sort of like a resilience, and it's sort of like uh okay, well, this is done in this way, and this is it. And then when I started doing things for my clients, everybody's like, oh my God, it's like it works. I'm like, it's not a question about working, it's just like you just have to open up a little bit. I think that the private jet industry in general, aviation, it's still one of the only industry that is still very in the
Yes,
box.
we are.
And like they somehow they don't want to do it. Or what I realize is that also maybe the designers or like people who are working in that are not, like, or they don't want to educate themselves, or they just want to just get it done and over and done with. And I felt like they don't want to push it to another level, or like, like go forward on creating new things. And I think this is what's lacking as well. There are great designers out there. I mean, don't take me wrong, but what I'm saying is that they kind of like carbon copy what are the do's and don'ts, and they don't want to be a little bit out of the box. And with me, what I do in general, I'm always out of the box. I'm the last person to be in anything that I do. I always push boundaries, and because I believe that there's no boundaries in what one does. It's only we fix ourselves on a boundary. And the way that I work and on all my projects and all my clients is that I always want to bring something also new for them, because I think that like people get sick and tired, because I get sick and tired of seeing the same thing like all the time. And I think there's a huge educational gap on that to be fulfilled. And I think that it will be catched very fast as well, because a lot of people are waiting for that. And especially when people have that kind of money to like to have a private plane or to charter or whatsoever, they've seen it all. They have their houses that is already on another level. They've got their yachts that is already on another level. So I think that the only industry that is kind of like lacking that is like right, like private aviation. And I think there's a huge market on that,
Perfect.
educational and growth.
As you told, we are sometimes missing this thinking outside the box. And when you're too long in the same image, you're getting absorbed by, the same way of doing. It's not because they don't want it, because maybe they don't have time, maybe they didn't have an idea. That's why, for me, it's very important to sometimes scream outside of the box and make people wonder what can be done in a different way. And when you start arguing, it's not about you have the only right way to think, but this is the way you're getting other people thinking, asking questions, and where you're asking questions, you're exchanging with your colleagues. This is the way to accelerate, this move
100%.
to a next level. So if you're ready, it will be my pleasure. We will work on that together.
Okay, my pleasure. No problem.